line. Good evening again, Arvind. What's your sense? Do you think there was enough in the Friday announcements for you to pull out a buying list?
Well, Lata, certainly it helps tremendously to have seen that tax rollback as well as some incentives announced for the overall economy. That's a positive. But in the middle of what looks like a real meltdown in the trade war situation, it's not an India-specific issue, but there's a global risk-off issue going on. And therefore, in this growing likelihood of a global recession, we're not jumping in with both feet anywhere. India obviously is relatively less affected by global trade war than other markets. So on a relative basis, it's better. But I'm not sure this is the time to be a hero in any market, given that we have, such a big potential blow-up coming in terms of global trade.
Okay, Arvind, hi, good morning. What about the broader market in India, the economy-facing stocks? We have seen, it's pretty much a bear market over there over the last 1 year. Stocks down 30, 40, in certain cases, even more than 60%. Going by valuation comfort, do you think there are areas to buy now?
I think some of the mid-cap higher quality companies have certainly gotten, thrown out in a way that certainly looks oversold both from a historical relative valuation and an absolute valuation. And given where Indian bond yields are and where interest rates are likely to continue to head, I think one of the things that makes some of these companies interesting is just from a valuation standpoint, given current bond yields, it does look interesting. So, I think the key missing ingredient has been domestic growth. Clearly, it has disappointed significantly. But I think, on both on an absolute and on a relative basis, Indian growth potentially in the next 12 months could be one of the better signs in the world because it will be coming off a bottom while the rest of the world could be going into a slowdown, and India may see less of that effect. So in that sense, yes, it would be some of the higher quality mid-caps where we would find some of our best opportunities.
Arvind, hi, good morning. So what do you do, since you spoke about domestic growth, I wanted your view on autos because, what has come through, of course, are positive statements, but that would not necessarily mean higher demand because, there's no clarity on things like the scrappage policy. There's nothing for two-wheelers where the damage has been highest. And these auto stocks have rallied quite a bit this month. What do you do with this space now?
Well, I don't think the auto stocks that we would like to buy have gotten to the levels of valuation that are screamers for us yet. So yes, auto stocks, auto is one of the sectors that has seen the biggest slowdown, but it's not a sector where valuations have come down to levels where maybe some of the auto parts suppliers with a more global footprint have gotten a little more interesting and could be getting close to those levels. But the auto stocks themselves, I don't think are at levels where we're excited with the valuations. And yes, the cycle should gradually turn, not because of any steps that were dramatically announced on Friday, but you can't have double-digit declines, forever in an economy which still is very underpenetrated. So therefore, I think that there is more of a cyclical recovery that we see. The Friday announcements may be very modestly positive, but I think it's more betting on the long-term economic cycle of India and the likelihood of growth in auto sales.
So when you said high-quality mid-caps, after all, the mid-caps have fallen almost 30% at an index level. What are you referring to?
Well, as I said, one of the areas could be some of the auto components companies like, Motherson Sumi or Bharat Forge, that kind of companies that we're talking about. The auto sector. We could be talking about, the real estate sector, some of the companies we like, although that sector has also gotten very badly beat up. Some of the higher quality NBFCs that have sold off, or maybe not as much as some of the lower quality ones, but, some of them are not in that bad a shape as much as they've sold off, and that could be interesting. And, some of the banks, there are certain banks other than the couple of names that people have been hiding out in the private sector banking universe, which could be interesting in an economic recovery. The banks are always, the financials, whether it's the banks or NBFCs, are always a very good way to play the cycle. So those would be some of the areas that I would emphasize.
Okay. Arvind, for over 18 months, we are hearing that time to shift from IT to domestic stocks has come, but if anything, it's only the IT stocks which have had the big rally. The unadulterated bull market is on. Do you think that's still going to outperform even from these levels?
I don't think so, because if we are going to worry about global growth and a global, potential recession coming in the next 6 to 12 months, which is becoming a higher and higher probability with trade war, and if the Indian growth, which has been extremely disappointing, as I've said, in the last 12 months, is on an uptrend, then, what has worked, which was playing, at the end of the day, IT was playing, global growth versus Indian weakness, and the Indian stocks said, I think it might be time to flip that trade. Again, with a 12-month view, I can't say in the next 1 month or 2 months whether that'll work or not, but over the next 12 months, I would much rather be playing some of the domestic-facing Indian companies that have oversold rather than chasing after the IT rally.
Okay, finally then, before we let you go, just one more word on this reversal of the FPI tax surcharge, because it's been an issue so close to your heart. Is this finally done? I mean, is this a relief that the FPI market wanted, and do you see more flows come through because of this?
It certainly will help. I mean, I guess the problem is going to be in a risk-off environment. These measures are positive, but not a completely determining factor. But yes, it definitely looks like, and again, the final details will come out. But it sounds like from everything we heard on Friday and everything we've read since then that it looks like there is a definitive rollback of this, inadvertent tax on FPIs. And if that does prove to be what we've heard so far and seen so far, then that'll be certainly a positive for India in terms of fund flows.
All right, Arvind, we'll leave it at that. We will know what the ticker is going to tell us about the FM's announcements and about whether India is really any kind of a safe haven from the ongoing trade war, which has led to so much bloodletting this morning on other Asian markets. We'll wait and see how things pan out. Thank you very much for joining us. And with that, we shift from macros to micros. Our research team is standing by with what they think are the top 10 stocks that you should watch out for the day. Anuj?
Lata, first of all, for starters, if you're taking any long trade today on a gap up, you have to be very careful because, the first rally sometimes is vulnerable. And your stop losses will be Friday's low, so it will be deep, not today's low. Normally you want to keep day's low, but there's a good chance that day's low gets taken out at some point, so Friday's low. I think you have to think which sectors benefit and then choose the best stock out of that. So for me, I think Cholamandalam investment, that's the FNO stock. It's a auto financing in general may do well today. That would be the area perhaps where you might see people want to play it via that. It's a strong stock trading at the 200-day moving average, so that would be my first stock to watch. I think the other stock to watch would be Vedanta, this time on the red side, because it had a rally on Friday in line with the market overall. But today the global cues are too weak, and it's a stock going through its own bear market, so that's why it will be in focus.
All right, so those are the two stocks, Chola and Vedanta, that Anuj is watching. But as Arvind Sanger said, the big positive really is the rollback of the FPI surcharge. Now, which are the stocks that have a high percentage of FPI holdings and could be in focus today? Nimesh, my colleague, is here to give you that lowdown. Hi, Nimesh. Morning.
Hi, Sonia. So this was the actual material announcement made by the FM on Friday, and I've just looked at the stocks where the FI holding is quite high. HDFC stands out at 75% FI holding, Shriram Transport at 58%, ICICI Bank and IndusInd Bank close to 57%, Indiabull Housing is at 52%, Just Dial, Infosys at close to 58%. So HDFC and Axis Bank are the other ones where the holding is close to 50%. So these are the top 10 stocks where the FI holding is quite high. Some of the stocks may see a bit of a short covering rally, the likes of ICICI Bank, Shriram Transport, which were pretty much down last week and may see a bit of a short covering rally. But again, as I said, this is purely a sentiment positive for FIs. It was just an irritant for them. Now only we need to see as to how global risk pan out, and accordingly you'll see some bit of reaction. But these are the top holdings where the FI holding was quite high, and it's a bit of a relief rally for these stocks.
Okay, thank you very much. We will keep flashing these stocks for you. But I think we should go to autos now, because other than the FPIs, there was a material benefit for the autos in terms of the 15% depreciation.
All right. So, I just want to put it on board first that the statements are sentiment positive. This is the feedback that I'm getting, but may not cause more demand improvement in the near term. Now, why is that? A, there is no clarity on the scrappage policy just yet. So that could be a negative for commercial vehicle players. There's no stimulus that has been announced for two-wheelers, and we know that that's the pocket that has got hit the hardest. Also, this government lifting the ban on purchase of new government vehicles will not lead to more demand in the near term, because in any case, the fiscal situation is tight. This 15% higher depreciation, yes, it does impact 30%, because 70% of the operators are small fleet operators who may not get incentivized, to buy just because of higher depreciation, because their business is suffering a lot. So, yes, it will impact the remaining 30%. So, maybe Ashok Leyland, Eicher Motors could be in the green. But I must caveat that, there is nothing much for the passenger vehicle players or even for the two-wheeler players. So, perhaps, it would be best to not, go aggressively maybe long on them. Having said all of that, there are a couple of ills that have been corrected. So, the finance minister has deferred the increase in the one-time vehicle registration fee, which was much needed at this point. Also, all BS4 vehicles purchased before 31st March can be used till their registration period ends. That's another positive as well. So, having said all of this, Ashok Leyland, Eicher Motors could perhaps start off in the green, but then you never know how the day may shape up.
Fair point. It looks like it's shaping up green if you look at the SGX Nifty. Abhishek, PSU banks to get 70,000 crore anytime soon?
Well, Lata, government has announced that they will be upfronting the 70,000 crore of budgeted capital for PSU banks, and this is perhaps the first time that they will be giving it in H1 of any fiscal. IDBI Bank, Central Bank of India, Indian Overseas Bank, PNB, UCO and Canara Bank have their Tier 1 ratio below the threshold of 9%. So the flow may be into these banks given the fact that they are lowly capitalized. Analysts say that, NBFC will also benefit due to, capitalization of PSU banks, as the cost of funds will reduce for them as they borrow from banks, and the quantum of flow will also improve. So you have the likes of Bajaj Finance, Chola, Muthoot Group, Shriram Group, which will benefit. On the loser side, it might be HFCs, as rate transmission by PSU banks will be faster, and there will be competition on the pricing of mortgage portfolios. Back to you.
Okay, well, let's hope so. I'm a little unsure till the gains are actually passed on. Anisha, government also said that payment will be released quickly to infra companies?
Oh, well, yes, the finance minister, announced a slew of measures for the infrastructure space, including deepening of bond markets and providing easier credit access to infrastructure companies, also easing the funds which were due from the government to these construction players, as well as reiterated the target to spend 100 lakh crore over the next 5 years on infrastructure. This is important because the working capital situation of the EPC players was a bit tight. The likes of NCC, Gayatri Projects, Reliance Infrastructure, etc. have been complaining about outstanding dues from the government, both in terms of receivables as well as arbitration claims. So this will be a positive. However, JP Morgan believes that these measures are not entirely new. This is something that the government has been talking about, and these measures are also very broad-based. So they'll wait for the implementation to happen to give any positive feedback. But for today, sentiment positive.
Okay, for today, sentiment positive. So let's see how these stocks react today. But Sonia, Indigo in news again?
Well, I'm expecting the stock to be in the green because Rakesh Gangwal has apparently flagged off a truce with Rahul Bhatia. So he's made some statements saying that the board has now approved a new related party transaction. So on all the issues that he had disapproved earlier, he has sort of come to, an approval. He now intends to support a move to expand the company's board to 10 directors. And he also supports the proposed changes to the Articles of Association. He says it's gratifying to see progress towards better governance. So on all of the issues that they disagreed earlier, they have now come together. At least Rakesh Gangwal has decided to support. There is an AGM scheduled tomorrow, so he's likely to make these statements. So I expect the stock to be in the green.
It's been disgusting the way this has, whole issue has panned out over the last 3 months. And I remember making this point that don't be surprised if at some point all of a sudden there's a truce and the stock goes back to its all-time high. And just over the last, the only one who suffered in between all of this is the poor retail trader or investor who gets, who puts a stop loss or, gets scared easily. And amidst all of this, the stock's back to its highs. And look at the kind of, moves which has happened. It's an F&O stock, and the kind of trades that would have happened over the last 6 months. I think it's just disgusting.
1,500 to 1,300 is very unfair. Oh, I mean, they could have sorted
And
their
back to 1700.
differences. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Sonal, a couple of stocks which we should note for news.
Absolutely, Lata. Let me start with IPCA Labs. The company has received Form 483 with 3 observations from their Silvassa plant. But the good part is that this unit was under import alert since 2015, so that gets lifted after issuance of this Form 483. Another pharma stock on my radar is Alchem Labs. They have received Form 483 for 2 of their facilities. First is the Buddy facility, where they have been issued 0 observations, and second is the St. Louis facility, where they have received 4 observations. However, it's important to note that Buddy facility is more important than St. Louis facility. Lastly, watching out for Reliance Cap, where CARE has downgraded their rating, has also revised their outlook for the company. This is because of revision in timelines for divestments and also because of the decline in their standalone financial performance. So expect that stock to be in red today.
All right, thanks a lot for that. So here's a quick recap of our top stocks. Stocks with positive news flow. There's HDFC, HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, IndusInd Bank, IDBI Bank, Central Bank, IOB, PNB, Bajaj Finance, Chola, Muthoot Finance, Ashok Leyland, Eicher Motors, L&T, HCC, NCC, Interglobe Aviation, IPCA Labs and Alchem Labs. Lot of green stocks today. While stocks with negative news flow this morning, there's Indiabulls Housing, DHFL, PNB Housing and Reliance Capital. We'll discuss all the big triggers for the day and all that happened since Friday evening with Prakash Diwan, who joins in on the other side with some long-term stock ideas. Also at 8:45 this morning, Sudarshan Sukhani, Mitesh Thakkar and Prakash